I do have a piece of advice that I would give to anyone in law enforcement is at some point you are going to retire. And at some point you may want to do something else. So I think it's in your best interest, not only from a long-term post-law enforcement career perspective, but also from a healthy perspective of continuing to learn and grow while you're on the job. Have a diversity of things that you do. So don't just be the SWAT guy for 30 years. Don't just be the computer guy for 30 years. Don't just be the patrol guy for 30 years. Have a variety of different things that you do. Seek out different opportunities for different assignments. Seek out as much education and training as you can get. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to make you more well-rounded. I think you're going to be happier. And it's going to give you a wider variety of things possibly to choose from in your next life after law enforcement.
Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. Hey Chaplain is the officer wellness podcast which brings you expertise and wisdom from police officers around the world. The Hey Chaplain podcast is just a few months away from reaching the end of its 4th year, and we've produced about 175 episodes. So people ask, how can we make sure that you produce another 175 episodes? If you want to contribute, if you want to help the show, pay for all the hosting fees and editing software and other costs that I have, you can go to the episode description or the show notes, and there's a link in there that says support the show. That'll take you to the site where you can contribute to the show, and you can purchase a virtual $5 coffee to help out. Please hear me. You do not need to ever do that. But thank you to everyone who does. On today's episode, we're returning to our conversation with retired DEA agent Todd Hixson. Now, if you haven't listened to part 1, episode 107, then what are you doing? Stop right now, go back to that episode, and listen to that one first. All right, I'm assuming you did that, and now you're back. So today, Todd is going to talk about his career and some of his travels, or at least the parts he's allowed to talk about. But just like in part 1, where we talked about going Fed, this week, he's also going to talk to us about retiring from a federal agent job. Here's Todd Hixson. Todd, thanks for coming back. I appreciate you being here again.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you come into the DEA in the 90s?
Yes.
Okay. So this is pre-9/11. This is like Colombian cartels. That would be a big thing going on.
Sure.
With the DEA.
Yeah.
And then as you get into your career, you get 9/11, you're going to have like Afghanistan, you're going to have Mexican cartels,
right?
Becoming a big deal. There's going to be stuff like that where people think DEA and they think that's what's going on. What kind of unique places and opportunities and things did you have in your career?
I had all sorts of opportunities because if you can remember back to the 90s and then into the 2000s, the war on drugs was a big deal, and it had become sort of a whole of government approach, as they say. So there were a lot of resources poured into that problem. And so we were given a lot of latitude and a lot of resources to deal with that. So I was able to leverage, U.S. military assets or the Coast Guard when I was in Alabama. They helped me out quite a bit, and I could just call over there and say, will you guys, can we fire the helicopter up? Can we take the jet out? Like if we needed to do some surveillance or to help me with some operations. So I could leverage resources outside of DEA to help me out because, again, there was a priority within the government of dealing with this stuff. So, over my career, I had some unique travel opportunities. I was in Iraq for a little while. I did some traveling near the end of my career, doing some protection detail activities at headquarters. So, got to go to Colombia, Azerbaijan. All sorts of different places.
What do you miss about working at the DEA?
I enjoyed the creativity of working for DEA. So here's what I mean by that. There were some other agencies where their caseload was sort of determined by someone else, and that case was sort of set on your lap to go work this case. At DEA, it was the opposite. It's you go out and develop a case. You determine what the priority is. You find the biggest baddest drug dealer in your region, and you go after that person, and you're creative about how you're going to put your task force together, who I'm going to collaborate with, how am I going to find a federal prosecutor to work on this? Because essentially I'm selling the case, right? So I'm selling my vision of what this case could be and what this priority is to people up above me and people outside of the agency to get everyone to collaborate to come in on this. I enjoyed that part about it a lot. That's if you ask me what I miss about the job, it's that part of it, because I was able to be creative and find creative solutions and end up dismantling and disrupting some pretty large drug organizations because of what I was able to. And again, it wasn't that I was the smartest guy in the room, because I certainly wasn't, but I was able to build a coalition, and I was able to bring people together and convince people to work with me and convince them why this was a good project for them to be involved with. And that was the best part of it for me.
What are some of your highlights?
One of the highlights, this was the best assignment I ever had in DEA, and I absolutely love this. So I was selected to be an assistant attaché for DEA at the U.S. Embassy up in Ottawa, Canada. So that was a 3-year foreign assignment. They moved me and the family up to Canada, paid for our housing. My office was in the U.S. Embassy there. And I was a liaison to the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, as well as to other law enforcement entities up there. But they were sort of my main point of contact. And so I was, my whole purpose there was to be a liaison between the DEA and other federal law enforcement in the U.S. And Canadian law enforcement, because again, they have completely different laws, sovereign country. They have their own culture, their own way of looking at drug problems, their own way of sort of approaching drug trafficking issues. But all these issues are international, right? So none of these transnational criminal organizations recognize borders. Right. So it was really, how do I bring together DEA and RCMP or other agencies to work collaboratively on these cases? So some very interesting stuff. Worked with a variety of different agencies, both law enforcement and intelligence agencies.
What drugs are coming through Canada?
So Canada had, when I was up there, fentanyl was just starting to become a little bit of an issue. Methamphetamine was an issue up there. Cocaine was an issue. I would say methamphetamine and cocaine were two of the very big issues when I was there. Canada deals with some unique organized crime issues up there because their laws are very different from U.S. laws. So they don't have the equivalent to sort of our RICO type laws, where if you arrest someone and they're looking at 1 million years, they have the ability to cooperate and tell you about everyone else in the organization. That doesn't exist up there. If they're working a biker case and they put some, bikers in prison up there, no one's going to have to rat on anyone else. So they'll come out of prison with the same amount of credibility that they went into prison, so they can continue their activities.
Right. And the lower level guys can get arrested, and that doesn't necessarily jeopardize the people above them in the organization.
Right, because there's no mechanism within the law to grant favor to someone based on their cooperation. Very different from the U.S.
Yeah.
So, if you get big in the U.S. and you get arrested and you cooperate, that's great for your sentence, but now no one's ever going to work with you again when you get out because you cooperated before. So it creates sort of some long-term issues for them up there that was a challenge for them to deal with. Money laundering was a big issue up there. We had some sort of collaborative money laundering investigations. But again, their laws are very different up there. Just a lot of interesting sort of international stuff was, that's what I liked about that assignment. It was completely different. And when I went to DEA, one of the things that sort of stuck in my mind throughout my career was I want to do something here that I couldn't have done at the police department. So I was looking for opportunities that were different from what I was doing at the police department, right? So I was looking for something unique, right? I just didn't want my DEA career to be just a continuation of my police department career. I wanted it to be different and unique. And so that was sort of a theme that went through my mind when I was trying to look at these different assignments and look at these opportunities. And that's why going to the embassy was so appealing.
Any notes about the RCMP? Were they just good professionals to work with, or was there something strange or unusual about them?
They're wonderfully nice professional people. Again, they have a lot of challenges related to their laws, so they just don't have the same. They don't have the same ability they don't have the same tools to problem solve with that we do here. So I felt bad for those guys a lot of times because they just couldn't. They were sort of fighting with one hand tied behind their back because of the laws up there. Very smart, hardworking, professional people, just again sort of hampered by some of the laws up there.
In your opinion, I mean, I think a lot of people are aware of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but the modern version of them, what are they the equivalent to in the U.S.? So
they're really sort of a mix of a federal component, and they do contract local policing. So most of the provinces in Canada are patrolled by RCMP uniform officers, right? So they have sort of that local function. Now, a number of the big cities have their own police department. They're like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, etc. But there are only two provinces that have our equivalent of a state police, and that's Quebec and Ontario.
So they're a little bit like state troopers. They're a little bit.
They're sort of a mix of everything. But they. So they don't have the equivalent of like a separate ATF and a separate Secret Service and a separate DEA and FBI. So they handle all those federal responsibilities like we do within one agency.
Okay.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. The RCMP is a giant organization, huge organization. So there's challenges bureaucratically with any giant organization like that.
Sure.
And then again,
and juggling a lot of different responsibilities.
Right. They had a lot on their plate, and the laws did not help them at all.
Okay. Anything else on Canada?
Just a great experience. It was great to represent the United States. They gave you a good feeling to go into the meetings, and you're the U.S. representative in the meetings. It humbles you a lot because each country in the world where DEA has representation, they have different needs and sort of different expectations of the DEA. My experience was Canadians do not subscribe to American exceptionalism. Like we think that everyone should. And so I learned very quickly that they're not really interested in me helping them do their job because they're very good at that. They're more interested in me representing and bringing to the table sort of our intelligence and our leads
resources
and our leads that could help them. They're very proud people, and rightly so. So when I was in Iraq, we were there with. You're going to cut some of this out, so I'm going to see how I can phrase this.
Okay. Okay, Todd had to censor himself on several things that he's not allowed to tell me or anyone else. Let's try this again.
We were over there with a number of other U.S. agencies involved in trying to help stabilize the government of Iraq. And we were trying to use sort of a whole of government approach. My role over there was interesting because it had nothing to do with drugs. It had more to do with U.S. citizens that had been being held hostage over there.
See, I was going to ask that. I was going to ask what's the drug component that would bring the DEA
I really
to
had
Iraq.
nothing. I really had nothing to do with drugs there. It was really more for the skill set that I brought to the table as an investigator.
Okay.
And so how do you bring that investigative piece to the table to sort of work with the military and intelligence and other pieces of the government to try to solve some of these problems, right? So a collaborative problem solving. And so I brought that to the table along with people from other agencies that were there. That was incredibly interesting. I met some of the smartest people I've ever dealt with in my life. Were from the U.S. government over there working, trying to solve the problem. It was an incredibly huge, frankly, unsolvable problem. It was a dangerous environment. We were there during the beginning of the surge. So if you remember when Petraeus had the surge started there, we had a lot of rocket attacks, mortar attacks in the green zone. I mean, it was...
you say citizens were being kidnapped. Who... like contractors or
both.
People with dual citizenship? Or?
Both. Yeah, there were a lot of contractors that had been held hostage over there. There were dual citizens. So you had a lot of Iraqi U.S. citizens that had gone back after the fall of Saddam, and some of them were getting what we call rolled up. They were getting kidnapped.
Yeah,
there were some other U.S. citizens that came over there for sort of religious purposes. Several of them got kidnapped, and so it was.
Missionaries?
Yes, missionaries who had been told ahead of time, don't come over here.
They went in, yeah.
And again, that's fine, but the problem is it now creates a problem for the resources there.
Yeah.
And so I saw that. So some of those sorts of things were a little bit frustrating. In the end, I don't know how much we accomplished. I sure learned a lot. And it was, for me, again, if you go back to my roots of being interested in the State Department or CIA, it allowed me to be on the tip of the spear of U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah.
And so in 2007, that was the tip of the spear for U.S. foreign policy. And I enjoyed that part of it immensely. Near the end of my career, I was the head of the protection detail for the head of DEA. I was responsible for the security on all his travel all over the world. And so we had a great European trip at one point. We were in Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany. Then we were in Azerbaijan, which is never in the world would I didn't even know how to spell Azerbaijan or
check to find it on a map
or understand where it was. But we went to Baku, beautiful city, and so had a great trip there. We took him down to Colombia. We were in Bogota, Cartagena. We were at some jungle training facilities down there. Again, sort of witnessing the tip of the spear of U.S. foreign policy, witnessing sort of what U.S. foreign aid does in real time. And those people in Colombia couldn't have been more appreciative of the DEA. Colombian police were fantastic hosts, and got to fly around in their Black Hawk helicopters that were provided by the U.S., and all their guys have been trained by the U.S., and just really saw some neat stuff, just some really cool stuff going on. So again, all those trips I never would have had if I had stayed at the police department. Great travel experience.
Talk to me about planning to retire from a federal job. What goes into that? So you're forced out at a certain age.
Yeah. So the way I looked at it, and this is the way I think, it's not just federal. I think law enforcement in general can look at this. This is a young man's game. And the reason why the government that you're working for, federal, state, or local, the reason why they offer you a pension at an early age is because it is a young man's game and you've earned it. And you can't look at this like any other career, like, oh, wow, I need to do this till I'm 65. These pension systems are designed for you to retire at a relatively young age. You need to prepare for that. You are going to retire. So I've had conversations with other guys that are like, oh my God, how do you deal with, not doing this anymore? I'm like, what? I'm like, there's a season in your life for everything, but this is not meant to go on forever.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And you were more of an investigator than a door kicker.
Both.
Okay. So you did have some door kicking.
A lot, yeah. And
element.
Well, that was the thing that originally, that also appealed to me about DEA, because you're both. There's quite a bit of both.
Yeah. The door kickers age fast. And that's something that a lot of guys feel at a not that old of an age, but they start to feel it. It's like, I don't know if my back and my knees and whatever, my shoulders can keep doing this.
It's hard for some people to let go. And I've seen that. And that's, like I told guys, you are going to retire.
Yes.
Now you can pretend like I'll just keep riding this along, and somehow I'm going to be the only guy in the history of mankind that doesn't retire. But it's going to happen. You're going to retire. So the healthy way to look at it, in my opinion, was you're going to transition out. You have a ginormous opportunity because of your pension to go do something else. You can reinvent yourself in your 50s. You can be someone completely different with a giant net underneath you to catch you if whatever you try fails. Yeah. No one else has that. Very few people have that. Yeah. We need to realize what a gift that is, and a gift that we've earned, and utilize that appropriately. You can go do anything you want. I have a friend of mine that I worked with that retired recently. He set up a ministry in Arkansas. I know guys that have done all kinds of different things. Life's too short, I think, to just say, I'm going to be a badge and gun guy for the rest of my life. Yeah. I think there's more out there for you.
There's a lot of life after the badge and gun, and that has to be considered.
Right. And that's on you. I mean, you have the opportunity. They will pay you not to come to work anymore at a young age. They will pay you just to breathe. And then you can go do something else all day long. Mm-hmm. Now you can look at it. You can look at that from a monetary perspective. Like, now I can double dip. Now I can double my money. You can look at it like, now I've got all this free time to explore new things. I can try a new career. I can learn something new. The main thing is learning and growing, because I've found, like, if you're not doing that, I mean, there's a certain point you reach in law enforcement, like, all right, what else are you going to learn? I mean, like, what else are you going to do? So at the end of my career, I felt like I had done everything that I wanted to do. And at that point, it was best for me and my family for me to retire and not do another move. And and so
I was going to ask what factors led to, because I know you didn't wait till that mandatory retirement age. So you left a little bit early.
I went when I could. I went at 50, which is that's when you can retire as a federal law enforcement.
Okay, but another move was not in the cards.
We didn't want to move. My son was now back near my older son that I had moved away from was back near us now. I wanted to be sort of near him again. And it was also a gift to my family. I mean, I think my wife she didn't love the early mornings where I'd be gone with SRT doing search warrants and doing stuff like that. I mean, I think when I met her, she was a widow and her husband was a Coast Guard pilot who had been killed. And so she's dealt with being in a relationship with someone in a dangerous job and the stress that creates.
That's a good husband move to be sensitive to that, to know that my loved one has a potentially raw nerve here, that there's a area where that's going to be sensitive. And if you can be sensitive to that need, that's a powerful gift. And so that's actually really smart. You get extra husband points for that. I appreciate that. It was a whole sort of mix of things that led to it. But I'm glad I did, and I was able to try new things and try things and fail, and try things and succeed. And that's the main thing, because you get institutionalized working for the government for your whole professional life. And, I did a little private sector stuff right when I retired, and that was good. I'm glad I still do a little private sector stuff. Any that you want to talk about? I think it's interesting what people do in their retirement. What kind of things have you done?
So I do some part-time security consulting for Major League Soccer.
Really?
Which has been very cool, and it's made up of mostly guys like me, retired law enforcement guys, and there's a couple of us in each market in the U.S., and we work with the local teams to sort of make sure they're implementing the league policy. And so there's a lot, there's collaboration with law enforcement and the team security and with the league office. And so
do you have to travel with them?
I've traveled a little bit with them. I've done a little bit of travel for some international matches that are sponsored, international matches within the U.S. It's been fun. Again, it's not a lot of heavy lifting. It's a little bit of work. So that's been fun. Something completely different. What
else do you get from that, though?
It's the camaraderie, right? It's the being a part of a team again, right? Which I miss. Now, again, I don't miss being part of a team enough to want to go back and do all that stuff again, right? I mean,
right.
Because
in small doses.
Right. I mean, if you could cherry pick the very best things that you did in law enforcement and that's all you did, that'd be great. But they wouldn't pay you because that animal, as my old partner said, that animal doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So you got to take the good with the bad. And I also do my main retirement job that I do is I do a lot of work for what's called the National Overdose Response Strategy. So it's essentially working to bring together law enforcement agencies and public health entities to collaborate and come up with solutions or at least programs to work towards reducing overdose numbers.
Okay.
And I've enjoyed that because I think it's important work. I mean, you're really trying to save lives.
How did your DEA experience contribute to being good at that job? Because
I had worked in the realm of drug addiction and drug trafficking professionally, so I sort of understood that world a little bit. And then I had also, more importantly, I developed a lot of contacts and built my Rolodex, so to speak, within law enforcement. And so I was able to leverage that. In my job, when I want to go meet with a police chief or a sheriff or something, it's easy for me to get a meeting with them because I can, normally we know someone in common, or I can just tell them a little bit about what I did professionally, and they're happy to talk to me, right? Because in law enforcement, you're not just going to meet with anyone.
Credibility
is huge. Yeah.
So you're working under the auspices of the White House. for a certain section of the country, you're coordinating between law enforcement agencies and like health departments.
Right. Yeah. So I work under the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, and under ONDCP are HIDAs, high intensity drug trafficking areas. So I work for Midwest HIDA. In my specific role, I am the Kansas coordinator, the state coordinator for the National Overdose Response Strategy. So I represent that national ORS program within Kansas. And so I try to bring together law enforcement. I try to bring together recovery groups, public health departments, citizens action groups, community coalitions.
Okay, I can tell from that list already that some of these groups are not going to be on the same page.
Nope.
About what the problem is or even use the same language. Right?
So here's what I was able to do. Here's to sort of to tie a bow on some of the stuff earlier in the podcast. When I was in Canada, I was a diplomat. So I was not a Canadian law enforcement officer. I was simply there to explain to the Canadians how Americans think and how we talk and the acronyms we use and our worldview as it relates to drug cases and try to bring people together. Same thing now. I'm a liaison from law enforcement to public health and a liaison from public health to law enforcement because there's different acronyms, different worldviews, different cultures, and I'm trying to bring those groups together to explain to each other. I'm negotiating deals, right? I'm bringing people together and say, hey, here's why you should work with them, and here's why you should trust them. And by the way, here's why you should trust them and work with them. And here's an idea of something that you guys can work on together. And I think you'll like the results. And the long-term results will be fewer people dying. And that's at the end of the day what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So yeah, that DEA experience in Canada specifically informed how you do this job now.
Yeah, I was a diplomat. I was a liaison, and that's exactly what this is. I'm a liaison. So yeah, awesome. I don't have any money, right? I don't have a checkbook to go write checks in Kansas to solve people's problems. But I know people who have the checkbooks, and I'm going to introduce them to the people that need the money and have conversations about how they can work together and try to foster and facilitate those relationships. Yeah. So in a way, for me in retirement, it's the very best thing I could ask for.
That's awesome.
Because I like doing it. It's not a lot of heavy lifting. It's utilizing what I know how to do, which is bring people together.
Todd, thank you for coming in today. That was fantastic.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
I am so thankful for Todd's willingness to be on the show and to trust his story to me. Whether we're talking about top secret missions, legal cases that have not been adjudicated yet, or some sensitive personal matters, one of my goals is to build up trust with both my audience and my guests that, hey, Chaplain is not going to cross a line that you don't want crossed. And we're still going to bring you great wisdom and encouragement from the world of law enforcement. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain. Now, I saw you rescue the moment at a ceremony not long ago. The bugler had an electronic bugle. Yeah. You have a legit bugle that you actually play, and then you have the ones that project a recording.
Yeah, there's a little device in the bell.
Yeah, so they hit play, and they mime playing the bugle as it plays tabs.
Correct.
And there was a malfunction. And I go to a funeral, especially if I'm officiating, I am always ready for what's plan B, what's the contingency if this doesn't work. I've just done enough weddings and funerals that I know things don't always go according to plan. So I'm always prepared. Mm-hmm. And I saw the officer struggle and thought, this isn't going to work. And I looked at you. And you didn't see me, but I was watching you, and you rescued the moment.
I mean, I've seen enough of the trumpets. I know, that you turned on, then you hit the button, you have like a 3-second delay, and so when something doesn't happen, you kind of go, oh, well, they didn't hit the button or something. But when the officer first did it, she pushed the button, and all I heard was a huh. And I immediately knew there was no battery there.
Yep.
It gave its last right then and there. And she tried a couple more times. It was kind of obvious nothing was going to happen. I just went ahead and struck up and started playing.
The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.